You're listening to We Deepen Media.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, founder and CEO of We Deepen, Feminine Weapon, and also a certified professional love coach and matchmaker. You know, you've heard me say on this podcast before, I don't really love the term matchmaker, but it's easiest for the public to understand what I do. I more so love midwifing relationships, seeing people who I'd say the types of people that I work with and I'm most interested in working with are people who would be in my social circle. And that includes people who are interested in longevity, mental health, biohackers, growth junkies, people who, want to, pardon me if I sound so cheesy, but create the world that we wish to see, who are the leaders and at the forefront of that movement. And I believe that the more that when we're grounded in intimate connection, we have the power to do much bigger things in the world. I personally have noticed, I have entered, you guys may have heard me talk about this, entered solidified myself into a relationship. Like I feel like I'm in a secure, attached relationship. And it's a good thing because as I am leading the Love Club, we have 22 members of the first cohort of the Love Club who are on an intimacy journey that I am guiding that includes peer-to-peer matchmaking, comprehensive relationship education, and accountability to one's love goals. And I thank God. Thank you, God, for giving me a partner so I can fully focus on those around me and not have to be looking around like, are you my person? Are you my person? Should we be in a relationship with? I don't have that right now. And what I'm really interested in when I say the people that I work with are those who I can feel intuitively that when they are in a secure attachment, a healthy, thriving relationship, that their energetics can be redirected or fully directed towards their purpose, and towards moving this. There's so much, and my guest Oz Garcia today, he is at the forefront of the movement towards living healthier, longer, happier lives. So people like him, and again, people at the forefront of that movement, to see them in thriving, loving relationships, that's what I want. That's what excites me most. And those are why those experiences that we curate at WeDeepen.com, they're experiences that we produce as an organization inside of We Deepen, and that I've out there and I've spotlighted, and I've seen the Tantra Institute is up to great things. They host all the Tantra speed dates that you'll see listed on the calendar. Plus the Feels, which has come out of New York City and now expanding into Los Angeles, which is a dating experience that drops people more deeper into their emotions and allows them to be in a state of practice of love. We've also been curating some medicine ceremonies. I know, don't tell the government yet. We have some of those up on We Deepen that we are curating for you. Lots of new things to come. So check out that calendar. If you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, rate, give it 5 stars. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to host it. And before I jump in this conversation, if you are listening to this podcast and it's pre-February of 2024, or right around that time, Kimmy Inch is hosting 2 Something Mores in Austin, Texas. Kimmy Inch is a pro dominatrix, a kink educator, and she facilitates a 4-day immersion into the exploration of eroticism, erotic wellness. You get to practice being fully expressed, being empowered in your love life and your relationship. It's perfect if you're with a significant other and you two are to come and do these immersion together, as well as if you're currently single. I highly recommend checking that out. If you're a man out there, I took this program in the fall of 2023. And it was about half couples, half people who weren't in partnership. And out of the half of the people who were in partnership, one single man, only one single man, lucky him. But I love it when a man is willing to come and study love pre-partner. What a gift that you'll give to your future significant other when you step into those spaces. And hey, it's a good place. It's a really good place to potentially meet your match out in the world. Who wants to swipe on dating apps anymore? Like there's so much rich activity happening in real life. And if you're a busy entrepreneur, happy to support you in this privately, just reach out to me. Otherwise, come and immerse yourself in experiences.
Hey you, it's Christina. What you're about to listen to is an episode with Oz Garcia. Oz is brilliant. He is a pioneer of neuronutrition of 40 years. He's an author of 5 best-selling books. He's a biohacker, and he has been working with the affluent on how they live long, healthy lives for decades. I invited Oz to have this conversation with me because he's a single man and he lives in between New York City and Miami. And I wanted to show women over 50, 55, that there are men around their age, again, Oz is 73, who could meet them intellectually in the heart and shine light on, like, look at these guys. They're such great men. What happened, though, was towards the end of the podcast, I asked Oz about age and his preference. And he said that he desired to date women under 50. I was a bit conflicted, disheartened, and I left the episode, disheartened. Initially, I went into protect mode. I wanted to protect him from the criticism because attraction is personal. And I also, it rubbed me the wrong way. It definitely rubbed me the wrong way. So I invited Oz back on the line. We jumped back into conversation. He told me about a lover he had who was 70 that he completely forgot about. And what you're going to listen to is now a vulnerable conversation as we unpack the first, that first recording. And you're going to get to listen to that as well. So enjoy the brilliance of Oz Garcia and let me know what you think.
Okay, so if you could start where you said when we got off the phone or something, or we met in
1969, 1970. So she was about 16 then, and I was 19. I'm 3 years older than her. And we always remained in touch and on and off during the years. In between relationships, we'd hook up. Right. And the fascinating thing is somehow that relationship, in just the way that it's turned out, has endured more than 5 decades. Mm-hmm. And we've had episodes, I think, in the 90s. Hold on, let me just give me 1 second. It was the 90s. We didn't have much contact in the 90s, and somehow we hooked up on Facebook again. It was absolutely blew my mind. And then it started up again as just old friends meeting up, and the spark was still there. And we picked up being lovers, I'd say, 2000, around 2008, 2009. And we've been lovers since then. Right. So it can go months, but we probably talk weekly, biweekly. We text often. And it's so interesting to me that I didn't think about it. Right. It was so seamless. And that would have been important to have said. Right. So I find her equally as attractive now, and she just turned 70 a few months ago, as when she was 16, 17. How about that?
Wow.
I don't see her any differently. In other words, our conversations are obviously much more mature, what's on our mind, but that she's seen me go through, and I've seen her go through so many chapters of our lives. Right? You can't make this shit up. And when I thought about it after you and I spoke, it was like, oh, Michelle. Right? So this isn't something that's all that typical. I don't know that people typically can maintain a flame that long, but given, I think there's certain components, Christina, that stand out. So one is the fact that underneath it all was always a friendship. She always knew, she knew me very well. I've been friends with her through her marriages. She's been friends with me through my marriages. I think during those periods of time, it was just a friendship. And then we would, I hate saying it this way, but then we would hook up again, right? And what was always terrific about it was the original connections, what brought us together. Back then, it was all New York City rock and roll. You know, I was going to college. I was out of college. She was working for Condé Nast. She was an editor at Condé Nast. Absolutely striking woman back then, and striking woman still, you know, at 70. And if I were to really think about it, there's a great deal of comfort with her that I don't find, if I go for the option, that I don't find there at all.
What does that mean if you go for the option?
If I go for an option with, let's say, if I were to exercise the option of seeing somebody younger. Right. So I think familiarity, understanding that over these decades, her and I have not ever had a crossword is fascinating.
And
absolutely fascinating.
What keeps you as lovers versus the desire to label and define and lock in?
You know, it started out as lovers. I was in one relationship, she was in another, and we pretty much would go behind our partners' backs to meet up. And then there were times, and that went on. I mean, this is, think about the fact that I come from the counterculture generation, right? Sex, love, and rock and roll. And at that time in my life, if I hadn't told you, and I think I did, I mean, I had very long hair. I wore bell bottom, pants. I mean, I was a true fucking hippie. I smoked weed all the time. I did acid regularly. I would do acid and go to school. How about that?
Wow.
But so did many people that were of the counterculture, right? And so somehow we survived that. I went on to then be in beauty and fashion photography. I think we covered that. And I was a very successful beauty and fashion photographer, and even through those years, her and I would periodically hook up, but I was already with the person that I was going to marry. And then I think we just stayed in touch as best as I recall, but she knew me through that chapter, through that era. And then when I kind of segued into nutrition and long distance running and being a racer and left fashion photography, my conversations about my career changes, I remember having with her. So she's always been a confidant, which is, and as I've been for her. Right. And so through all these different eras, and I thought I really had to give it thought after you and I talked. It was like, well, wait a minute. this is a lot more relevant than just saying that there are no men that want to hook up really with women in their 60s or 70s. I just don't believe that. And I think I emphasize that you're better off taking your chances with being authentic, sincere, relevant, and timely than your notions of what it is and what it should be and how it's going to turn out or not. There's a whole movement right now that's trying to change the whole conversation about ageism, right? And to change the vocabulary. So when I had my hips replaced, when I had both hips replaced, the guy that replaced both hips is one of the best sports hip replacement guys in the world up at Mount Sinai, and I'm not going to say his name, but anyway, I remember that when I left his office on the first time after he did the X-rays and the scans and all this shit, he gave me a form, like a checkout form, right? And I get to the elevator and I open it, and it's kind of a set of notes on what him and I discussed. And what he wrote was, elderly male, lives alone in 3-floor walk up. And I go, what the fuck? You know, like it sounds like I'm on my last breath.
Yeah.
You know, I live in a friggin' townhouse. You know, typically when I go up the 3 flights, I fly up the 6 flights, you know, and then I come back down 3 to my floor. And I thought, I could beat this guy up. He's got to be in his early 40s, and I could kick the shit out of him. He's calling me elderly male, right? So there's a problem with that. Mm-hmm. There's no, in terms of my generation, how I think about things, and everybody will be there. You'll be there someday. Dave will be there someday. You're not going to be in the conversation that our parents or grandparents are in about being this age. And so if you're able to disassemble that vocabulary in women, and which is very, very difficult in a highly misogynistic ageist society, where women are going to be pegged in a particular way, right? And men are conditioned to actually look for partners, kind of like trophy partners, right? Certainly if they're monetized in a particular way, and they drank the Kool-Aid, right? And they just don't understand that there's so. If you're going to be in a relationship, you and I both know, being out of a relationship comes with its own set of problems. Being in a relationship comes with its own set of problems, plenty. And if you're that generationally separated, there's going to be a lot of problems.
Yeah. So how would you change the answer now? Because while we're recording this, you know, a new conversation to go with the podcast that we recorded, it was, you know, me getting off the line and being like, one of the reasons why I wanted to record this episode with Oz is because he's this, you know, brilliant New York City, sophisticated man who's currently single. And I want to show amazing women over the age of 50, 55 that men like this exist and are available.
Well, but I think where this part couldn't show up was we went down that very dangerous road of New York, single male in New York in his 70s, and then everything else I just said. That's almost. And by the way, this is not a comment on you. I'm realizing that it's a trap, because New York City is ground zero for, how do I say this? Self-aggrandizement, you know, like men in the city are highly, highly entitled, and certainly if you're within a certain strata in terms of what you earn, your material wealth, your position within the community, within the marketplace, and so on. So it's the entitlement that drives male behavior in New York City, right? And if you're looking, it's kind of like the Woody Allen movie. I forget which one it is, where he's up in the Catskills. I'll think of it soon. Think of it in a moment. He's in the Catskills and he's sitting at the bar and he's trying to, pick up somebody, get laid, whatever. And this really attractive woman comes up to him, obviously Jewish, and she says to him, and they're talking, they're having a great time. And she says, "So what do you do?" And he says, "Well, I'm a comedian." And with that, she pivots and goes, "Oh," and walks away, right? And he figures the game out really quickly. Next one that comes over says to him, "What do you do?" He goes, "I'm a dentist." And she goes, "Really?" And it's like, that's the way it is in New York. Everybody's a fucking dentist.
So in this moment, we're recording, you're in Miami. You were in New York City when we initially recorded. So were you channeling that archetype when you answered the question and said you didn't want women over 50?
Very good. You got it. And also remember what I'm pointing out, that in an option-filled environment, I'm a very, very good student of culture, certainly New York culture. And having lived so many lives in New York, right, in different markets, doing so many very novel occupations, I always kind of stood out. And like I said, you begin to think that you're really something, right? That you are entitled. And I think the point I was trying to make was, it's not so good. That's not so good. It's not such a good place. So when you really think about it, you're not so optioned, right? It's like Nemo in the Matrix, right? He comes to what's his name? Fishburne is talking to him. And he says, "Listen, go back to your complacent bubble and never figure out what reality is. And so you're gonna take the fucking red pill, right? And bye-bye. Or we can open your eyes and you can see what is. And to accomplish that, you need to take the blue pill." So I think I was addressing more the fact that New York City is very much, and I'm sure there are people that are going to counter this. For the most part, it's everybody's taking the red pill.
You know what?
Right, that right there. So if you were to look at it, generally speaking, New York City is a red pill matrix city, right? Everybody's under so many illusions, and it's generations that have built up the city to create people that are highly entitled. Right. So thank God there are enough conscious people on the planet, enough conscious people in New York City. They're the ones that I run with. Right. Those are my community. That's my community. And it's interesting, if God forbid you go on to page 6 or you're doom scrolling on Instagram and you're seeing people that you used to hang out with still going to Lovo, Tao downtown, Bond Zero, and you're like, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? Like, really?
I know, but Sex and the City days have ended. They ended in 2004. Maybe.
Yeah.
It went till 2010.
Yeah, but it's still going. And I mean, it ended for me too. But now it's just fascinating that I was ever a part of it. Right. And if so, if you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, and you're going there, you took the red pill, and what you're going to do is wind up in your default mode in your head, talking to yourself about your inadequacies. That's not where you get. That's not where you need to show up.
So it sounds like you've had a change of heart or change of mind or an expansion in perspective since we first recorded.
Well. Remember, I think that I've given it more thought, and remember what I pointed out to you, that in an option-filled environment, I'm no less driven by what the culture, what local culture is pushing in terms of how a man should be or behave. Right? I would still opt for that. When I think about how much I've let go, certainly since I got really sick with COVID, and the whole value system shifted, right? It just completely shifted in terms of what it is that's on my mind and that I want. And I'm saying that it very much by category, Christina. So if we didn't talk about it, I had the rock star apartment, 2,800 square feet, 20 floors up, the most spectacular. And I can't imagine, people would think I'm making this up, but I can't imagine living there anymore. Like, what was I doing there? Yeah, gorgeous apartment, two gigantic bathrooms. The second bathroom belonged to my 9-pound Dachshund.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have his toys in there and his wee pad and his little bed, and I thought, really? So when you pull back from that, it doesn't mean that you've pulled back completely. Temptation certainly shows up. There are times where that you should probably opt and go the other way, and you make another mistake. All right, so you'll make a hedonistic mistake, and then you're reminded, and you go, "What?" Like I said earlier, what was I thinking about? That was a lot of work. That was way too much work.
What would you say to somebody listening who is, close to 50, over 50, and currently single and longing to be in a relationship, whether it's man or woman? And I want to change the reframe that word, maybe not necessarily longing to be in a relationship, but would like to share the rest of their life with somebody and deepen with them in new experiences.
This is going to sound in some ways cliche, but stay with me. I think the work begins first with oneself, right? So there's enough experts in relationship that are going to say, hey, you got to love yourself. Without self-love, nobody else is going to, you're going to hear all of that. But I want to be careful and not give advice so much as I'm well aware that you're more likely to get what you want if you're not so desiring. Like is the platform from where that's coming from being driven by originality? Is your thinking original in that regard? Is there a degree of trauma that's driving it, right? Is there fear involved? So what's going on is a kind of reflection over the subject matter of companionship, finding somebody to share my life with, travel the world with. So I really do believe that if you're not doing work on yourself, certainly mindfulness work, and you're growing your EQ, then it becomes more difficult. People do smell that coming. And I thought about I've even thought about this question. It's funny. We kind of, I think we either hinted at it or you did ask it, but I was walking in my neighborhood and I was thinking about different clients who over the years had their relationships blow up because, and one in particular, she was in her 50s and she had met the guy that she was going to spend, that she wanted to marry, and thought that she was going to spend the rest of her life with. And he broke up with her, and she was heartbroken. She was in. This is a really self-made individual, very, very powerful in business, very attractive in many ways, certainly intellectually, physically, very, just beautifully put together, very elegant human being. Yet in this area that she couldn't see what she couldn't see. In other words, I think her particular needs were so high that she was insisting that they get married or they were going to have to break up. And they broke up. He broke it off. Right. So the energy, it's the energy. It's all about the energy. Right. I'm not going to tell anybody where to go look for true love. I mean, there's enough organizations and events and people that they can meet and work with, certainly like you. No, there's plenty of opportunity, but I think you got to be a person that's desirable, not desperate.
Yeah, totally. I hear what you're saying. Well, let's let them listen. Let's let them listen to the episode. I think we covered it. I think we got.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, good. And if you need more, I'm around. I'll be around. I'm around.
So my guest, we're going to dive into conversation today, Oz Garcia. I first noticed Oz at Jim Quick had a book launch party in Miami this past fall. And he invited a few of his friends on stage who have been instrumental in supporting him and his career and his longevity. And Oz was one of them. And then probably about 2 weeks later, one of my big sisters, Michelle Ann Frank, shout out to Michelle, sends me a text message and is like, there's this amazing man. He's changed my life and he's so supportive of my health. And I would love to give something back to him. Will you host him on your podcast? And she raves about this man. And I was like, well, Michelle, is he single? And she laughed and she's like, yes, he is. And we actually dated like a decade ago. He was so fun to date. We had such a good time in that. And now we've become friends. So I think it speaks high testament if you have people who have dated you in the past who are like, yes, I love this man and I want to see the best for him. That's a good man. Welcome to Deepen with Christina. It's so, I love that we now get this opportunity to deepen in conversation and share that with others.
I'm thrilled, Christina. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start with, how's your love life?
Very interesting in many ways that you and I can discuss. There's been an evolution in my love life, I would say, certainly from the way it was when I was much younger, and now with the ability to look back with a high degree of wisdom, mindfulness, what it is that I would say is a great love life is very different than when you're looking to fulfill a private agenda, right? You go on a date and you're being driven by your hormones, your testosterone, whatever you think is going to make you get the goal, right? What would be on your mind when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even in your 60s. So these days, it's all about, I want to get to know who I'm spending time with, and it may sound almost like a cliche. That most people would say that, right? Like I want to know, I really want to get to know you. Like I really want to get to know what's on your mind, what is it that you're up to in life, and so on. But to be very honest with you, that's really what's on my mind only. And short of that, I don't go into any kind of dating situation, let's say, or meeting somebody with a private agenda. It's fascinating not to have one, right? And to have gotten to a point, either through all the ways that any one of us moves through life and the impediments that we hit up against, the kind of romantic illusions that drive us, not that drives us so often. And we wind up in relationships that are painful. We wind up getting hurt. We wind up breaking people's hearts. We wind up having our heart broken. It's wonderful to be in a place where I have no interest in any of that. Like, am I romantic? Probably more than ever before, but it's wonderful to, like I said before, to not be driven so much by my crazy hormones at this point in life. It makes for a greater interactive situation with anybody that I'm going out with these days. And I love going out. I love meeting people. You know, everything's working great, but I'm fascinated with the fact that my brain is at this point, that my body's at this point in terms of what's interesting in being with somebody.
I was really excited to have met you because I work with both men and women. And more recently, I've had a lot of, and throughout the years, like women over 50,
right,
who are seeking to date men around their age, or, I think it's very similar right now. What's happening, and specifically, and, you're a pioneer in nutrition and longevity. And I know you've written multiple books, and
right.
you work with, the leaders of our world to make sure they're healthy. That's accurate, right?
Correct.
Okay. So there's the women, what I'm feeling around, are hearing around, and let's say I said 50, let's say like 55 plus,
Sure.
is that they're more looking for men who are younger than them,
right,
because they observe around them that men their own age haven't been taking really good care of themselves, and they're vibrant and they're alive and they want to hike and they want to do things. And these particular people they're not big drinkers. We've seen a lot of, I think that the older generation, I'm a daughter of my father loves a Jack Daniels every night.
Sure.
And these subset of women, they're healthy and vibrant. Now, on the other side of that, men over 55 will generally come to me, and they want young women who are
Correct.
vibrant and alive, and help them to not feel as old as maybe they are, somewhat feeling inside. So it's a little like we're at this, this conflicting tension point of the women want younger men and the men want younger women. And I think that there's somewhat of a missing piece, like that there's like a reframe needs to happen. So I'm curious, as you're a man, do you mind sharing your age?
I'm about to turn 73.
73. So a very handsome 73, vibrant man. And how do you view age and navigating love at the same time? Like, what's your perspective on this?
So let's unpack a lot of what you brought up. There's a lot there. And the first thing that comes to mind is we live in an option-rich environment. So by that, I mean that men that are in my age category can actually go cherry picking much younger, and if that's what they're interested in. And so I want to qualify that, right? Because there are problems that will show up, generational problems, in terms of how somebody in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, and in their 50s look at the world. And then if you have a woman who's in their 50s, is in really good health, good condition, and we would say by all typical normative standards is quite attractive and beautiful, fit. That, you know, life after menopause is very different these days than it was certainly in my mother's generation, even if we look back 20 years ago. So you're talking about the fact that somebody in that age group that's a woman can actually fish to, you know, into a younger age pool, let's say, and because of how they maintain themselves, they may find what it is that they're looking for. There's, I would say, no boundaries at this point when you're talking about looking at dating from any age point up or down. There's a fascinating article that just appeared in The Atlantic about age gap relationships, where you've got women that are dating men that are much younger, seeing men or are in committed relationships with men that are younger, and the reverse. And the conversation that's out there is, do these relationships work? Of course they do. And I would say that a lot has to do with the degree of emotional intelligence that you bring to the table. So if you're looking for something meaningful at any age, right, I think that you got to be real clear what your goals are. If you're talking about most men that are on a hedonistic treadmill and living in an urban environment, and they've got plenty of money, and maybe they've been married already and they're in their 50s, and they're divorced or not, and they're looking to go out with somebody younger, then my question really is, what is it that they're looking for, right? Is it that they want a committed relationship? Is it that they want another trophy on their arm? Is it that they're looking to embellish their image when they go out? Is it that they're looking to embellish their image in their mind by dating somebody that's a lot younger? So there are different kinds of dynamics that are going on that are important to kind of tease out. If you're real clear on what your intentions are in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, problem with men in New York is that they also have too many options, right? And unless you've done the work in terms of getting your EQ in line, your emotional intelligence in line, then whether you're looking to date younger, it's going to be a problem, right? What's in the mind of somebody who's in their 20s, even among the brightest women, right? What's in the mind of somebody who's in their 30s that has their life together substantially, they're real clear in terms of their professional goals. But there's something in terms of what a woman may be looking for, and I want to be careful not to generalize that is going to wind up being an emotionally equivalent exchange between both people involved. So if you're asking me, I'm not so interested in getting some. If we were talking about this before. If I'm going to go out, my mind isn't on let's get this person to bed, and it doesn't matter what age they're at. I'm really interested in finding out, is this person worth spending time with? And if eventually it winds up that that's where it evolves into, then that's terrific. But if you'd asked me when I was in my 50s, even, or certainly into my 60s. I can't quite believe that my agenda was still, let me get it all set up so that we have a great dinner, a couple glasses of wine, blah, blah, blah. How do I get them back to my apartment? And that's not such a comfortable way of being a male. And I've often thought about the fact that being a guy having grown up in New York City with all the opportunities that I did, growing up in the era of Studio 54, having been one of the most successful participants in the booming fashion industry of the 1970s and the 1980s. I was married to one of the most successful models of the 80s. And so I was accustomed to a certain kind of person that I wanted to be around, always into the 90s, into the 2000s, and so on. And to get to the point where that stopped mattering, and that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in what's attractive, but it's I can't look at something like Page Six, or I can't look at TMZ, or I can't look at any kind of the sites where what they're doing is they're promoting the current beautiful woman of the day, and in many ways not be. I want to be careful how I say this. Repulsed. It's like, how is it that so much interest is put on outside beauty, and again, this may sound a little bit cliched, other than what's behind the facade? What if you take off the Balenciaga gown, right? And what if we take off all the makeup by what's her name, Kenny Jenner, or whatever her name is, right? What do you have left when the extensions are taken off? What kind of human being do you have there, right? And what process are they in? What have they done? Are they into yoga? Do they meditate? Do they know what intermittent fasting is? What is it that they're reading? What are the books that interest them? So if that's not what you're interested in being with somebody, and you wind up in bed with them, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to talk about when you get up in the morning? What is it that you're going to be sharing? And I think about when that was my life, and I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Yeah, well, and I think what you're hitting on is, how the term self-love, we probably hear the term self-love more than you ever heard that before when you were younger.
No question about it.
And, I look at I can remember back when I lived in New York City for 12 years. I moved there directly out of college during the Sex and the City era. The last season of Sex and the City was playing as I was graduating college. And, and coming into New York City, there was, it's the style, is the martinis, it was the excitement. And I remember at times going to bed next to a man in my early 20s, and I didn't want to take my makeup off.
Wow.
And now it's rare that my nails are done. I just at this point, I think when I came into because when you, to me, love is this process of removing layers of the ego, the things that are holding you back from being the highest version of yourself, your fears, the negativities, and that self-image is part of the learning to love yourself. If I'm running, don't get me wrong, I would love to have my nails done nicely all the time, but it's just the time investment is just not worth it to me. And it's not that big of a deal. It actually took me about a year ago or so. I had a friend and I kept looking at her and be like, she never has her nails done. I'm like, and she looks fine. This seems much easier. I don't have to focus on that. And I see, I love being a woman and getting to dress up and go out. And I find that it's a beautiful ritual that I get to play in every once in a while, but not every day do I have the time to do that. Every day I have the time to be in flow of my life and, incorporate the meditations, incorporate the reading of the books, incorporating the in-depth conversations that enrich my soul. But that's I think the true journey into womanhood. Is the process of ripping away and stripping away. And I think that's radiance. when what a man is attracted to is like this level of radiance and confidence in her own being and her own self.
Okay, so you made a really good point. You made a couple of really great points, actually. So to self-love, I think that let's expand that out a little bit, and let's say that what I'm interested in, and what I think you're pointing towards is authenticity, right? So what you want to do is you want to authenticate yourself. Right. And that's a lot different. Actually, being authentic means being in touch, to your point, with what I would call natural vanity. Right. Show me one species of animal that isn't interested in being vain. And we could look across all mammals. We could look across bird species, all primates, right? How it is that men or the male in a species presents itself. And so there is natural vanity. If you go to Cipriani's in New York any night of the week, you're probably going to run into grotesque vanity. I hope I don't lose my friendship with the maitre d' at Cipriani's. But this is where you've now crossed some sort of boundary point where you're looking in the mirror. You've now spent an extensive amount of money on having your lips pumped up and your cheeks and your hair done in a particular manner, and you're wearing a certain kind of clothes and outfits. And what you're doing is you're looking to embellish your body in a way that you've now lost touch with authenticity. It's no longer authentic vanity, but what you're doing is you're looking to be attractive in ways that you just wonder, is this person looking in the mirror and going, do I look great? Like, I guess I look great. Right. And then go out and hit the town. And so at the point that I'm at, what I'm interested in, and this is great because I thought about this while I was listening to you, is self-love means that you're in the pursuit of being authentic. You're in the pursuit of being relevant. You're in the pursuit of being somebody that's really grateful for just as being able to wake up in the morning and go, okay, it's another day. What's the opportunity here? And you got to find that in the person that you're going to be spending time with, or who you're looking for. And a lot of times we'll take a pass. You'll take a pass, no matter how gorgeous the person may be. If you're driven by your hormones, as smart as you may be, intellectually evolved as you may be, if your emotional intelligence isn't there, then we know how this is going to end up. Right? It's the stereotypical rollout to really, getting involved with somebody because you're just really attracted to them without knowing who the person really is. Who do you typically meet when you go out? You're going to meet my ambassador, right? Or I'm going to meet your ambassador, right? I'm going to pull out my wallet, show you my Black American Express card. Oh, yeah. And look at the car that I'm driving. By the way, this is my part. So I'm shaping in your head who I want you to think that I am. Until we get involved, if I've been able to be a good enough salesman, right? My ambassador worked that well at it, and you're seduced, and you're seduced into inauthenticity, and that's where the problems begin.
Yeah, it's such a slippery slope. I saw one of those Instagram reels. Somebody had sent it to me a couple of days ago, and he was talking about how we've got it wrong right now from dating to marriage, that a lot of the shit is hitting the fan in marriage as opposed to dating. Dating, it should be shitty. Dating should be a very challenging time with lots of tension and two people coming together and the ups and downs. But instead, we're reserving ourselves and we're sending our our ambassadors of ourselves.
Sure.
And then getting married, and then all of a sudden, the realness comes out that we've been suppressing inside. And so that's where the challenging moments are happening. And it's like, no, bring it in the dating process. I was even also telling a friend, during those moments when you bring your authenticity And this is,
Yeah.
I think, for both genders, and this is, I'm talking specifically about a man and woman dating, but
Sure.
whoever is dating whoever, if our mind works really well to protect the heart.
Yes.
And it's essentially like when you are able to share that heart with another human, that, authenticity, it's so sexy. It's so attractive because then you as the other person wants to do everything you can to protect the heart. Like you want to protect their heart because you got to see it and you got to experience it. The mind got out of the way, and it's such a beautiful thing. And it's a rare thing to see. And I think that in a culture that we're so focusing on this external appearance, and as you said, I haven't heard this, like almost adding an extra layer of inauthenticity into our appearance. It's hard to then, it affects the psyche as well. There's an effect on the psyche that's pulling you back. And when I first started hearing Brene Brown preach about vulnerability in like 2014, I was like, okay, great. So I will, tell them about my challenging childhood, those moments that, I watched my parents argue and fight. But those real moments are of being vulnerable is like in the moment. It's like right there in the moment when you when that mind starts to go and protect you, and you can instead share what is happening with you with another person, and that's where the connection happens. I'm going to see if I can find an example.
No, you're doing great. And I would add to that while you're looking for the example. Let's remember what I'm pointing out, that if your attention is on yourself, right, and your attention is on shaping who I want you to think that I want you to think I am versus who I am really, then there's a lot of energy going into that, right? And then you got to work at maintaining that image all the way out until it collapses. There's the book by Oz Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. So in 100 Years of Solitude, there's a segment where the protagonist is talking to some older guy, and he's bitching and complaining about somebody else and something that was revealed. And the old man stops him and says to him, can you just shut up for a minute? Don't you understand that people have 3 lives? And he says, what do you mean? He says, well, you have your public life, your private, and you have your secret, right? And most people don't understand that there's even a private life, let alone a secret life. Like how much stuff do we conceal about ourselves that I never want you to know? And that's where the trouble is brewing, really, when you're getting involved with somebody, right? And in the short-sighted way that we often operate, we fall in love with who we got to know in public, right? And then, of course, after the honeymoon kind of wears off a while, and you get to see what person is in private. But God only knows what it is that's breeding all the way in the back that shows up 20 years later in a relationship or in a marriage where one of the partners walks out, and you just go, oh my God, I never really knew this person. There's a phenomenal article written in the New York Times recently. It had to have been a couple of weeks ago about just that. This woman who was married for 20 years and they had 2 children together. Was always, according to her, a wonderful marriage, and they spent the lockdown out in Provincetown. And at some point, while they were out there, one day she woke up and he was packing his bags. She asked him where he was going, and he didn't answer. He just packed everything, left, and she never heard from him again. All he did was just terminate everything through his lawyer. And she never saw him again. He never even contested custody of the children. And I thought to myself, my God, what? How did it leave her? And of course, what process did she have to go through? But what process was this man in? How much shit was he hiding? right? And yeah,
do you,
go ahead.
Do you think that's is it an evolutionary goal for us to be completely 100% transparent in our existence?
I think if you want peace of mind, you need to work to be a transparent human being, right? So you can't separate peace of mind from transparency. At this point, there's nothing more. Like in terms of where you're headed in your life, and where you're headed in your relationship now, and what it is that you're looking for, that I know that your partner is interested in the same value system. Right? But by your good fortune, this is who you wound up with somebody who shares that equivalent value system with you, right? And I think that for any relationship to be successful, however it is that it begins, if you meet at a party, if you meet at a dance, if you meet through friends, if you meet in a dating service, through a matchmaker, if at the beginning you're not setting a standard for yourself for full transparency, then things will turn out to be difficult along the way.
I guess my question though is, so yes, in relationship, true transparency is important, but how about from a societal perspective?
Okay. All right. So
because there's a thing like in the past, you don't go to work and tell your office like, oh, I'm navigating heartbreak today. Or I see it. I'm part of the Esther Perel discussion group on Facebook, and there's about 15,000 people in this group, and they share what they're experiencing relationally. And when the feature Facebook allowed for you to then now be able to post anonymously, there was a big, deep conversation inside of the group of like, is this disconnecting us? Now we can't really develop deeper bonds with you because we don't even know who you are that is sharing this question about your relationship. Now, of course, there's times where for own protection, because of where we are at right now in 2024, it's not safe. It's probably not safe for everybody to be fully transparent.
No,
is that the goal?
You got a good point, but let's just say that transparency and authenticity has to be tempered by discretion, right? So discretion is a critical skill, and that's knowing how to communicate what has to be communicated in a timely and relevant manner. So we're putting components together so that you know how it is to speak the truth, speak your truth, right? But also know what's not a useful thing to share in that moment. What's not, this is not going to add anything by saying this, right? So there are people that are I would say compulsively driven to tell the truth. And that doesn't always work out, certainly in terms of the culture at large, in terms of security concerns. You got to be careful. What's the information that's being doled out, and how much of it, and what's appropriate, and so on. So security, discretion. These are things that will determine how it is that you're driving your requirement to be authentic. No matter what goes on in conversation with me and anybody that I'm interacting with, friend, potential business partner, somebody that I'm interested in being involved with, I'm tempering what I'm saying the whole way. But the conversation is really important to me, right? As it is with you. This is what you do for a living. So we're having a remarkable conversation, and I'm not thinking much about what I'm going to say as it's coming out. You and I are just having fun talking, and so there, I'm not having any attention on me trying to shape anybody's thought about what, to our earlier point, what I want people to think about, what I want them to think about me. It's just not that important, right? What's important is the dialogue itself. And so as we're interacting, and certainly if you're interacting with somebody in a potential romantic situation, or at any point, what you're doing is you're looking in large measure for a person to reveal themselves, right? So that the both of you can figure out if this is going to be worth it for the both of you, right? And it does take time. Now, jumping into anything and it having, moving in with somebody within 3 months, I think it's just insane. Or saying I love you when you're only in for a month or 2 months or 3 months, or sex has been great. And the minute that you say I love you, whoa, who are you in love with? What is it that you're committing yourself to emotionally? It's like the whole subject matter of trust. Right? Trust in my world, at least from all my life experience at this point, is something to be earned. Right. And it's not like, well, you need to earn my trust. Well, it's just something that needs to be earned. But let's see how things work out. And before you say I love you and entrust your whole emotional life to somebody else, you better have a good sense, transparency in terms of who's this person on the other side? What do they mean when they say I love you? What's in all of that, right? And then you take it from there. But I would be very cautious with the power of words, which you and I are doing very well here, and we're doing it in conversation, right? What's being revealed in conversation. That's a good point. So I think if you can't be in a good conversation with somebody that you want to be involved with, it's got to be 3-4 tequilas, and finally getting around to like authentic conversation. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's definitely a practice. The I love you thing. Years ago, I was in relationship with somebody, and it was probably about 3 months into the connection, and he took me away to Ojai one weekend, and we were in the pool, laying beside each other on a floaty, and he said, I love you. And I was really confused in the moment because he wasn't looking into my eyes. And it was new. It was a new connection. I had actually recently broken up with somebody who I'd loved, but I never told him I loved him. So now I had somebody new, and that person I was in relationship with for 8 months or so. And I found myself at times like looking at the previous man, wanting to say I love you, but the words just would not come out of my mouth. And here I was in this new connection, 2, maybe 3 months in, but I think it was around 2 months in. He was, I love you. And I asked, I was like, what does that mean? And he did not like that response. He was like, don't ask that question. Don't ask that question. I was like, wait, but what does that mean? And he was like, don't ask that question. And I couldn't stop asking the question because I'm now confused why I can't ask the question. And it just did not go well. That was the beginning of the end of our relationship. Wow. But I think it's really important. If you want to tell somebody that you love them or share that love, let them. I don't know what does that even mean? Does that mean that you want to spend the rest of your life with me? Like, what did that mean? And it was such an awkward moment between the two of us. And now I highly recommend that to people, even before they say I love you, to tell them what it even means. Like, what do you mean by I love you?
Exactly. And again, if you're moving away from romantic notions, remember, I'm a diehard romantic, but romantic notions that we grow up with that tend to drive us in ways that we've observed in others, movies, but other couples, whatever we've been exposed to, that we're looking for true love, romantic true love, and that I think with time, with wisdom, I think transforms so that when you say I love you, what you're really saying is I think I know you. I know you enough. I know you in terms of who you are in public, private, and I even have a sense of who you may be that you don't really want the rest of the world to know. I'm interested in the full package. I love it. I love you. And that's different than coming off a notion, right? Immature, inauthentic notions of what we think love is, right? I grew up in an era where everything that I learned about love was watching Hollywood movies. I love the happy ending. My mother was completely enthralled and enchanted by Hollywood movies. So I would always watch movies with mom growing up, and there's such a way that so much of culture has been affected by romantic points of view that have been driven by the film industry. I remember being in Cuba. I remember growing up in Cuba. I remember being 10 years old and going to the movies. And this is how many people come to America. They would watch American movies and go, "We want that." Like get on the thing that's going to get me to the boat in the port, that's going to get me to Ellis Island in New York, because we want that thing that we saw in the movies. And I remember seeing Pillow Talk with Doris Day and Rock Hudson, and just going and just thinking to myself, "Oh my God, I want that. I want Doris Day." and I cannot tell you that this isn't true and wasn't true for many people in terms of what would shape their sense of what a successful romantic encounter would be. And remember that Hollywood movies always have a happy ending. You never know that afterwards, if they get married, one of them winds up being an alcoholic, or if they have kids that wind up doing fentanyl. Who knows, right? But it ends at that point where they have pillow talk.
I love hearing that you're, a diehard romantic. And I'm curious of what's that experience like, though, if you're, dating with no agenda, you're spending the time to get to know people.
Right.
How do you incorporate, because once you bring that, the romantic energy to it, do you still bring the romantic energy early on if your intention is to get to know somebody? And how do you find that ever confusing, or do you know when to bring it out and when to not bring it out? Or because a woman, we love romance and we love
Correct.
that, and it's not everybody is out there in the world playing that way, that it adds a level of excitement, and we want to keep going back for that.
But believe me, excitement is central to everything, right? So it's not like I'm going to go on a date and go to the local deli where, the diner. For me, it's I want to go to one of the better restaurants in New York. Let's go to Maria. Let's go to who do I love lately? Daniel Boulou. Let's go to a really great restaurant, and excitement is something that has to be part of any interaction. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be having great conversation there. Let's go to MoMA. Let's go to Museum of Modern Art. Let's walk around for a couple of hours. Oh, by the way, we can get champagne on the third floor. Let's have a couple glasses of champagne, keep walking around the museum. Let's have dinner at the MoMA restaurant, right? And continue this. But that deepens in large measure the interest to continue to know a person in ways that are not being driven by a private agenda. It's still about getting to know the person. right? And the conversation can be unbelievably electric and exciting when what your mind is on, what your notion of romance has now come to. Right. And so it isn't, remember what I keep pointing out, it isn't about having to get somewhere with somebody. It's about, can I be in this moment with this person? And being in the moment takes precedent over anything else. I think that's a better way to say it. Being in the moment with somebody makes for really great conversation. And I'll talk about anything. Right? If there's so much on my mind that you're going to have a hard time shutting me up. So if the person has difficulty being in conversation, I'm just going to initiate it because quiet, silent, embarrassing moments are I would say a reflex. You know, somebody's afraid to reveal themselves, and I have no problem being vulnerable, and so vulnerability, I think, makes for an exciting event, an exciting evening, an exciting time with somebody else.
Do you have a desire to be in a relationship with longevity?
Let me see how to answer that. If it turns out that way, yeah, but I don't think about it. Right. It's interesting that things have come to that. And I have friends that are in my age group or younger that they can't imagine not being with somebody, that their fear of being alone is overwhelming, right? That they're going to age alone. And I don't know if it's all my work over the last whatever, the work in mindfulness that has brought me to this point. But to the extent that I'm not suffering, and I'm not suffering over something that's missing, I'm very much at peace with the way things are. Now, if somebody shows up and it becomes even more interesting and involved, and of course, you know, nothing changes at this point in life. If you continue to be healthy and you're fit, you're still deeply attracted. And so you're going to go with that feeling, and I'm still going to want to get to know the person when it's like, oh, this is great. You know, we just had a great evening at the theater and dinner was terrific. And let's go to another one. And hey, you want to come over and look at my artwork? And if things evolve to something else, that's great. But I'm not thinking about it. I don't suffer over those things like I used to.
Well, so maybe you've swung the other way. If you suffered at one point and now you're in a space of contentment with it, is there also an avoidance aspect of you to it?
It's funny. I was thinking about this over the last several days. I don't know why, Christina, why this came to my mind, but I remember a time where if I didn't have a girlfriend, I wasn't in a relationship, I'd go nuts. And I thought to myself, who was that person that needed to be, I needed to have a girlfriend, I needed to be in a relationship, I needed to live with somebody. And so there was a need there that somehow has moved to a comfort with myself. Now, I know that this is not the way it is for most people. And I know that for most people, what I'm talking about isn't suitable. It's like, is this guy crazy? Of course, you don't want to die alone and all. I don't think I'm going to die alone. How about that? Right. And I don't think that I will be alone. But as it is, I'm not putting energy there. It's almost like if you listen to Joe Dispenza and you're meditating, you just know that it's going to come when it's going to come, right? All in due course. It just kind of happens. Like, oh, never thought I'd turn out having a relationship with this person. How wonderful is that? And it's it's almost like Zen. Like if your attention's on it and it's a burning desire and you're thinking about being in a relationship and you're not getting it. And you and I both know that people suffer about this all the time, suffer about it needlessly, right? Like, how come I can't get the guy? How come I can't get the woman? And when somehow you're able to step outside of that and just be comfortable. And I think it takes a certain kind of work to get to that point. It comes. I have no doubt that at some point that this kind of intimate relationship that people are looking for, but I'm not driven to look for, will show up. And like I said, it came up in conversation with somebody that was suffering a lot over the fact that their 10-year marriage had fallen apart. And he kept saying he kept telling me, I just don't want to be alone. I just don't want to be alone. And the mistakes that he's made since that marriage fell apart in the meantime, right? In terms of looking for a perfect partner. So what's driving that? And is a really good question for anybody. What's driving me to behave that way? Right. And I think that a lot of fun is lost in the process.
One thing about love that I didn't mention before is one of my Dr. Avron Rice. He is the author of the book Hidden in Plain Sight, how men's fears of women are shaping their intimate relationship. I've had him on the podcast twice, and he answered the question of like what love is. And he's like, this is going to be, I hope there's a Warren Hawking outside right now as I'm recording this podcast in Los Angeles. Hopefully someone stops. Oh, there we go. They stopped it. Is that that love is when you love the experience of yourself.
Good.
When you're in relation with this other person. I love who I am when I am with you.
Yes. No question about it. My friend Jody Levy, who's the CEO of Summit, told quite a while ago, we were having a conversation, and she point blank said to me, relationship is everything. Right. And I remember, and we talked about that a little bit. And she said, it's about how I feel when I'm around a certain person, how they make me feel. And I thought to myself, damn, I never really thought of that. I didn't think of it that way. Right. Like, yes, there are people that I'm around where I'm absolutely enchanted. Right. That I'm with this person and how I feel around them. And there's no question that energy plays an immense role in that regard. Right. Like it's all energy in the end. And we can talk about that.
How could being in a healthy relationship for you, how could that enhance your life?
How I would feel. Right? How I would feel. There's certainly, I'm well aware. Let's not, kind of dance around this. I'm well aware that there's an absence of a certain feeling or the absence of certain feelings that we know are wonderful when you're falling into, I want to be careful, love, or falling into what you're falling into when you're with somebody and you're having a terrific time. There's nothing that feels better. And it doesn't. You're in flow. You're with somebody. You've been out a couple of times, and all of a sudden you reach over and you wind up kissing, and you're like, oh my God, right? That energy that surges through your body, and what gets released into your brain, all the neurotransmitters of attraction that have been dormant for a while, and they come fully alive. That's incomparable. There's no drug that matches that. There's no 6 mile run in Central Park that's going to make me feel that way. Right. So I'm not blind to that. right? But there's a difference when you were in the pursuit of that, when we were in the pursuit of that, right? And then when it would wear off, then you're left with like, oh my God, what did I get myself into here? All right. So that's my point about, yeah, getting all of that's great, but do your work up front.
Mm. Do you know Gay Hendricks? He wrote The Big Leap.
Yeah.
He, I've had him and Katie, his significant other, on the podcast before, but Big Leap was one of those books I read about a decade ago. And towards the end of the book, he says that like 90% of successful people have awful personal relations. His theory was that it's like that we can't have it all. It's like I have to destroy something in my life. And generally, successful people will destroy their intimate relational lives.
Sure.
Based upon the work that you're doing in the world, of how have you seen, we've now in the past, was that a decade ago or so, that the Harvard study released that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships. And
that's correct.
You look at disease and mental health, and that a lot of times, I've had friends who are doctors who will say, when a woman, or a man, but is in health crisis, a lot of times you can ask of like what's happening at home with your love lives, and they're either going through breakups or divorce, or they're contemplating things. How have you seen the field of health change with this knowledge about relational lives?
Being intellectually involved in one area doesn't mean that it translates well into other areas of your life, right? So I think that there are many kinds of intelligences that each one of us could embody, should embody, may embody, don't embody, right? So if you're one of the world's top engineers, let's say Elon Musk, right? So the fact that this guy can actually create companies that, at one of which will probably put people on Mars. If you follow much of what he's doing outside of that, right? What it is that he puts on, Twitter, now X, and what's happened to Twitter. There's something so flawed in this man's ability to understand human beings that challenges each one of us to try and understand, how can you build a rocket to put a man on Mars, right? Be the wealthiest man on the planet, and yet be so insensitive to the concerns of so many people, right? And we could elaborate on that. I'm just using a very public example of how you can translate the best engineering skills to skills in terms of dealing with those around you that you love. Turns out he has a son that is trans, and they have no relationship. Mm-hmm. Now, how could that possibly be? Right? Like whatever one of my children, if I had them, would turn out to be, how can you not love them unconditionally? So as you're watching this unfold publicly, it just brings to mind a whole set of questions about, being the best engineer on the planet doesn't make you the best father, or doesn't make you the best lover, or the most sensitive person to concerns that are going on in the world. You have a man who's in this position who, because of what I would say is a tremendous lack in emotional intelligence, excuse me, and certain degrees of sensitivity that he's better off if you just keep him as the engineer that he is. But if you try to think about him as having skill capacity anywhere else, you're just going to beat your brain against the wall, right? Mm-hmm. And so we find this. So now let's take it down a bunch of notches to people that are extremely dedicated to the work that they do. With very few exceptions, are you going to find that there's happiness and a successful relationship at home? Sure, there are. But just because you're successful, say at Goldman Sachs or on Wall Street or the new unicorn that's coming out of Silicon Valley, doesn't mean that it translates into you having the skill capacity to be a loving human being, either to yourself or to somebody else. And so we need to split that and understand that to be a loving human being, love others, have compassion, have gratitude, be loving, be forgiving. Those are things that you need to learn. You need to learn that. It doesn't come all that naturally to a lot of people. To be kind, to let go, to not be antagonistic, right? And I don't know how it was for you, but I grew up in a family where my parents were at war all the time. It was like, oh my God. And my first marriage, my marriage was a carbon copy of how my dad pretty much interacted with mom. It's just fighting and arguing. Unless you can get around your antagonism, your petty antagonism, things just don't turn out well. If you're prone to angry outbursts, if you're looking to make your partner wrong, if you're in your head and talking to yourself about how you need to put this person in line or tell your truth or whatever, you're in the wrong conversation with yourself. And so being a graduate of Harvard Business School and accumulating a lot of material wealth and a lot of money means that you've commodified one thing, but have you really commodified love? Right? Have you really commodified peace of mind?
How have you learned to love, and how are you continuing to learn to love?
I would say that I had a great role model, which was my mother. And she was my best friend in the world. And through her, I really understood what love really was about. And I think part of this is genetic too. I think that there are those of us that love more. We're much more empathetic, right? And sometimes to our own detriment. We may love too much. And again, we're using love in a very conventional understanding. But for me, it's having come to a point in over the last several years where finding one of the things that you said earlier, that I can actually love myself, that I've let go and shed a lot in terms of being arguing with myself, whatever. That as I've let go of that, and I've learned to take on the thinking of people that I admire tremendously, certain thinkers in Zen, people whose work in terms of being a gracious human being, all of those things have defined love for me very differently. So love for me has many different aspects to it, many different doors to it. And I think gratitude plays a big role. I think gratefulness plays a big role. Yes, attraction plays a big role. Right? But it's all of these different kind of virtues where compassion is critical to love. Right. And when I think about my parents' relationship, where there was just so little of that in terms of how my dad behaved, where it was just hardcore Cuban machismo, how it is that women are treated, and they came from a different era. Mm-hmm. That love was about possession. It wasn't about the sharing of values where both kind of grew and spiraled all the way to the end. And that, I think, is where I would be looking or I would be saying love is, right? Where you have all these elements together, where you can look at somebody and just be so absolutely moved and grateful that you're in their company and they're with you. And you're like, fuck, this feels so good. Right. And that hugging and holding and touching takes on such tremendous value. Yeah, if sex comes out of it, all the better. Right. But there's this whole, bunch of aspects to a platform where if and I'm gonna requote Jody again, it's all about how they make you feel. And if you feel great in the company of somebody, and it's an ongoing thing and it's unfolding, and there's shared value systems in that regard, then you have true love.
So I know you have a men's retreat coming up that you're hosting. Is that correct?
Yeah, with Bentley in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica.
Amazing. So what would you say, like, there are women out there who are feeling as though, again, I'm going to go back to this, like, sure, 50, 55 plus, that where do they meet these men who can actually meet them in the emotional, like in emotional intelligence, who actually want to grow and evolve and be vibrant and live healthy lives and experience maybe the depths of intimacy that they haven't yet experienced this lifetime, because now we're coming into more information and more knowledge to be able to support us in healthy relating. Like, what would you tell these women?
You got to be working on yourself. You really do. Right? You got to go. I mean, I'm going to sound like a cult leader here for a minute. You got to go do Joe Dispenza. You got to go do Vipassana. You got to go do Landmark Forum. You got to go do Summit. You gotta participate. You can't be thinking that it's going to be solved by being on an app. Maybe, right? But for me, love is a function of participation. And if you want to meet somebody, whether you're 55 or 65 or 75 or 35, and you've been disappointed, and you've had your heart broken, and you just can't find candidates, then you're not participating. Happiness is a function of participation. So you need to find what's the next big. Go to Burning Man. It's really a function of participating at that level, and it's inside of that where the transformation occurs, the massive transformative impact occurs where the person shows up, and unless that's what you're pursuing, you're bound to be disappointed. If you're in a big city and you're scrolling through apps and you're on Match and something else and something, it's something there's soul missing, right? And unless your mind is on your soul, you growing in a soulful manner, in a spiritual manner. That these are, as we're talking, I mean, it just keeps becoming more obvious to me. And if remember what one of the things we talked about earlier, if you're on a hedonic treadmill, it's like being, it's like It's like the Matrix. It's like you took the wrong pill. You took the red pill. And so you're back just as being on a cultural treadmill that isn't allowing for you to be your autonomous development.
So I like your answer, and I think your answer is I said for women, but it's for men too. It's the same answer.
Yes.
For you personally, like, what have you yet to experience in intimacy this lifetime that you personally would like to experience?
I was a hippie. I was in Woodstock when I was 16 years old, right? And I lived through that era, and so you can imagine what that must have been like, right? I was full blown hippie kid. I went to a specialized high school in New York, the High School of Art and Design, at the height of the mod scene exploding in the world, right? So I was right dead center there. From there, I went to Pratt Institute. I went to probably one of the great art colleges in the world, and there I don't even know how to describe what that period was like. I was one of the kids that would go and protest against the Vietnam War, right? And then from there, I got my best friends were some of the coolest rockers in the world, from David Bowie hanging out downtown to all the clubs where the rock bands went, from Led Zeppelin to the New York Dolls. So it was fascinating to have lived through that. And I think back and I wonder, my God, like I lived through all of that. And then to wind up in the 1970s working with some of the top fashion icons in the world, winding up working for one of the leaders in fashion and beauty photographer, and then living through that era. And then one day giving up cigarette smoking and reading about people running a marathon in Central Park. And I thought, what is that? Right? When the Daily News said that marathon, look at all these crazy people, they're running Central Park 6 times. And I thought, I really want to do that. And I ran my first marathon in 1979. I never looked back. That was the beginning of what's macrobiotics, what's raw foodism, who's the people at Hippocrates Institute, what's wheatgrass, right? And living through that. And in the 1980s, living for running and racing and marathoning, and into the 90s and having built my practice. And being deeply involved with the human potential movement, from S to Landmark to the Conversation to Esalen Institute. And I'm telling you this hopefully to answer your question. And as I look back, it's been such a rich experience. And I got to say, psychedelics have played a big role along the way too. But coming to this point where it's been such a rich experience, I don't hunger over anything anymore, right? It's like I look back and it's been an unbelievable life. Like, oh my God, like, and my staff reminds me of this stuff all the time, right? And I almost died from COVID 3 years ago. 2 weeks from now will be my anniversary of having entered the hospital with severe COVID pneumonia and practically didn't make it out. And so living through that and then rebuilding my life and then, here we are talking. So I'm ambitious, but there was a time where I was blindly ambitious. And I think what drives me now is ethical ambition. And it's out of that I'm waiting for what the next thing is going to be. It's more like that. Like, I don't know that I got something in my mind remaining. Like, what's on my bucket list? So I'm almost like, let's see what shows up. At 73, if everything turns out great and Dave's right, I could probably make it another 70 years, hopefully in great condition, right? But what it looks like is an unfolding adventure. What's next? What in my life would constitute a next chapter if I were Indiana Jones? Who knows?
Okay, so I like this. You're up for the adventure, because I was about to get to a question, and before you mentioned the adventure aspect of the openness, and I was going to say, because you and I, when we Michelle had connected us, and I was like, oh, awesome, yeah, I'd love to meet him and talk with him about love and relationships on this podcast based upon his expertise and his network, and hear his how he's seeing things right now. And then after I asked the question, is he currently single? Me, as my matchmaker self, gets like excited. But moments ago in the conversation, I'm like, he has, I'm not saying, and I don't even love, I said going into this, I don't even love that term matchmaker. I love the adventure of intimacy.
Yes.
And I love, because I have made this my life's work in the past decade, I've gathered so much information, knowledge, and resources to support people in having a vibrant love life, that I am, bursting at the seams to share that. And moments ago, before you got to that adventure aspect, I'm like, okay, Oz, I don't know what to do with him. He doesn't really have belonging. He doesn't have interest. I'm not quite sure. Like, he's fine. So I'm not going to put energy here. But I was a little disappointed, because I'm like, okay, whatever. And then you said this adventure thing, and that's I think the invitation here for you.
There you go. It's all about the adventure. I couldn't put it any other way than that, right? And that's why I brought up the whole notion of Indiana Jones. One of the most important things, if you don't mind talking about this, Ramon, was the work that I did with Joe Dispenza, and he's all about stepping into your new life, right? Leaving your old life behind and stepping into your new life, and stepping into the unknown, right? So for me, it's driven. Life is driven now by what's the possibility, right? And whereas there used to be a very strong agenda, Friday night, this is what we're going to do, and Saturday night, I'm going to meet this chick, and blah, blah, blah. It's more like, it's fascinating when I look at my WhatsApp and I got an invitation, on Instagram, I've got 4 or 5 invitations to go out for drinks or dinner. And I'm like, well, how cool is this? And talking about social media, Instagram has turned out to be great in that way. But it's fascinating to me that it's become that effortless. How about that? Right. So I think the best way to put it is the effort's fallen out. Like, there's no needless suffering over, I got to get somewhere, but I'm deeply embedded in the adventure of it all.
I think you'd really like the adventure of Kimmy Inch's 4-day immersion that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast.
Sure.
She was one of the keynotes at the biohacking conference last year. She's a pro dom, a kink educator. She facilitates such an amazing 4-day. I have a whole podcast on just that experience of me going through it. And you learn Shibari. Shibari's become so popular these days. You can go to every party in the conscious community, has a Shibari demonstration. But they teach that. They teach flogging. She goes through there's a whole day dedicated to the erotic blueprints, and actually having some type of experience for each blueprint. Her spot in Austin, Texas, I tell her all the time that in the future, there's going to be a plaque outside of her home that says Kimmy Inch lived here, and probably have some of the, because inside her home, she has the cross and the bed with the cages around it and the spanking bench. And it's like a theme park for eroticism.
What an
And
adventure.
it's such an adventure. I highly suggest that program. It only, I think, 22 people partake in each of those experiences, and it does open up on one of the nights to a play party. However, it's more it's not like the typical like swinger type event. It's more of a lot of the people who are in the chorus practicing what they learned,
Nice.
directing those experiences. You can go upstairs is like the red room where people will, be in like more genital play, and downstairs. Somebody, by the way, I said genitals in a previous podcast. And I'm like, can you just not say that word? But upstairs is more of like the open genital play, and downstairs is like there's the cushy room and there's that room, and it is that level of adventure. And for people who are coupled, you can go and you can create what you and your significant other wish to experience as a unit inside of that. So it doesn't need to be this like scary thing. A lot of times, to couples to ignite their eroticism, they're like, let's go find a third to come and play with. But then somebody has fears around that. The other one's going to fall in love and this and that. This is like a space you can go to,
Nice.
and then you leave the space afterwards.
Remarkable.
So more things like that of, going and doing a tantra massage retreat, or playing in these spaces of intimacy that we, to have that facilitation, someone else organizing it for us and creating these safe spaces, and for you to have an adventure with, not just one woman, but like multiple women, and not an adventure with, it doesn't need to be so sexualized.
Oh, sign me up.
But more in that. Yeah. So I do. It's February. So she's doing February 8th through the 15th, and the weekend before is, I'm blanking on dates, but they're listed on the We Deepen calendar, and they'll be listed in the description here. So something like, if you're talking about adventure, that's where, and I love to, when we first connected, I will consider of a facilitated date in the mythic dimension, or
I think it's terrific.
You what?
I think that's terrific too.
Yeah. We'll do something like that. Would you, how do you, like, I know we opened and talked about age a little bit in dating. Are you one who's open to dating women your age?
No.
No. Say more.
I never have. It's just never been, not that I haven't dated people, let's say in their 50s or in their 60s, but it's not typically where things wind up for me. And to be very honest, I think that it's kind of where we started this conversation, that we're in such an option-filled environment, right? That I've got so many options that whether it's good or not, and whether this sounds very machismo, and I want to be careful that it doesn't cross over into misogynism at all, because I'm hardly that, is just where my preferences lie. And it's just been like that pretty much in terms of what it is that I much prefer. I can choose and pick, and that's never been much of a problem. But I much prefer going younger. That's always worked out for me better.
Attraction is so deeply personal, and I think it's one of those areas that we're never to judge anybody on what their personal desires for intimacy. We can edge people at times, or reframe at times, because we love each other and we don't want each other to miss out on things. But I think your no provides clarity for other people who potentially have these intimate desires that are personal to them, that they're like, this is what I want. What is it about, though, for you personally? Like, I get it, the options, but what is it? What does younger represent to you? What does younger do to you? How does that enhance you more than, say, somebody around your age?
It's a good question. It's as though I have no reality on my age. It's as though I have no reality on my age, right? So since I don't think about my age much at all, and given that I've always been able to satisfy my preferences, right? I'm well aware where my preferences lie. And I don't know that it's deeper than that, right? It's not like I'm not interested in supermodels. There was a time where, yeah, that was part of my life. And as I told you, my wife had been a very successful supermodel in her era. But I tend to have I just have that preference. And I know that it probably cuts off at around 50. Right? Probably cuts off at just around 50. So if I'm studying myself, I see where the cutoff point comes.
And women, and thank you for, by the way, having this conversation with me like this. What would a woman, because then you're going to the age-old philosophy that men want youth and women want money.
Right.
And so they trade those two things. Now, I do know you're a successful man. You've been successful in your career. Right. Do you look at that? Is that the trade-off? Would it be okay that a woman then like if you're, it's not, I'm not saying that primarily or the only thing that you're desiring is youth, but is that okay that she's also desiring finance?
I'm such a well-known, I don't want to say individual, quantity that it's almost, this is interesting, Christina, because in the way that my world is, people know who I am, right? People recognize me in terms of who I am besides who I am in public. Right? So I tend to be very transparent, and I would say, and again, I would also add vulnerability to that. So it's inside of that if that's the bait, and I want to be very careful about how that comes across, but if that's the bait, I know more or less that I can keep satisfying my preferences, and it isn't like I need to, like it's just not a struggle for me. How about that? Right. So yes, I think that there's a certain kind of individual that is privileged in that way. And I don't know if it's all that good or not, but it certainly works out in terms of my preferences overall. Like as an artist, as a photographer, now doing what I'm doing. And so whenever I'm moving in whatever community I'm moving inside of, it just seems to skew that way. It tends to skew a lot younger than I am.
Okay, and I see too. So I work with an organization called Aboutly, and they've developed a brain assessment where, different than a personality assessment, they will assess the brain based upon how it inputs information, processes it, and exports information. And they do this assessment through a an interview that somebody would have with a skilled practitioner who would assess the brain, or who would ask questions that would help to assess the brain. That video gets submitted to 3 psychotherapists who will then do the final rating. But one of the categories that they assess in is called subconscious fuel, a motivational subconscious fuel type. And it's what motivates a person on the subconscious level. And it's broken down into power, connection, or outcomes. So again, subconsciously, you're motivated by, this is what they've deemed these 3 we have different gauges inside of our operating system: power, connection, outcomes. I imagine your brain is high in power. My brain is high in power. Dave, partner's brain, his is high in power. And so I would imagine too that this desire, this preference for youth and young will be matched with somebody who also has a power brain, and that makes a compatibility. I think it's a new way of viewing that, as then just directly through a superficial lens, that a lot of us can probably take this conversation and see that there's some superficiality inside of there. But when people are more matched based upon empower, oftentimes we think of power as this negative thing, but power is actually what makes the world go round. And when there's power that's formulated through a lens of being integrist, and coming from that and being so transparent and so honest. So I want to thank you for, speaking to that, because that is vulnerable, I believe, to share with an audience, because you put things out there that get people to judge you.
Well, people will judge, and I do see myself as having it's either to my good fortune on the one hand, or just the way that things worked out, right? That I'm in a position to be able to pick and choose more the way that I want to, rather than what I'm forced to, or these are my only choices. Oh man. So I'm well aware of that. And I don't think I would change it for the world.
Well, what I see for you and what I want for you and for everybody to be able to experience is the real depths, like the depths of intimacy, to go to places that you might not have gone before, and to have that love that's so pure and so rich, and beyond the age, beyond the money, beyond it all. It's that pureness that only can happen over time. A lot of times it's super helpful to have facilitation through that experience. And I see that for you. And that's what I
see it too. But with age, you find out that you're going to have those experiences. I don't want to say many times, but you have them. And they happen often. They've happened often enough that's what I was saying to you before. It's almost like when you're with somebody and things are turning out, and you get to the point where you have that kiss, and everything just explodes. The dopamine's raging in your brain, and you're got cannabinoids rolling in your head, and you're like, oh my God, right? So I'm more than open to that experience again, right? But it's interesting. Human beings are very forgetful animals. Mm-hmm. Like we just don't remember that. We just don't remember a lot. But it's amazing. It's like you can have a partner where was a phenomenal sexual relationship, right? You guys break up and life goes on, and eventually you meet somebody else, and they wind up having a great sexual relationship. And this is the best sexual relationship I've ever had in my life. right? And as the years go on, you can't believe how many times you've said that to yourself, right? And I would say that also in terms of the depth of intimacy. But because I've had them, but what I would say is because I've had them, I'm certainly open to it happening again. Right? How about that? In other words, I already know the deep value that's there. And it's interesting that I haven't had it in a while, right? Yeah. Either because of the way things turned out the last several years and my preferences in terms of what it was that I was looking for more over the last couple of years. But, even coming to this conversation with you it was like, oh, this is interesting. Like if you'd asked me a year ago to be on and talk about this stuff, I wasn't that interested. It was like, you know what? I'd rather go home and hang out with my dog. Let me take my iPad out and so coming back into the world and having these conversations is kind of like a coming out all over again, right? Remember, 3rd anniversary of almost dying from COVID. Everything changed. And never thinking that I would ever have that experience again. And certainly that's evolved a lot. I'd say it's evolved more in 2023 that all the desire and all the want and the knowing that would be up ahead at some point. But remember what I had said was, it's not like I'm longing for it. It's like, yeah, I'm totally open for it. No question about it.
So you have the men's retreat coming up. Is there space for more guys to join?
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Do you want to tell us about it?
I think, so this was one of my dearest friends with Ben Lee. We did a men's retreat in last February. It'll be almost a year. And we had 10 men participating. It was phenomenal because I've done men's work before, only men together. And the one thing that was always missing was the soulfulness of it all. So we're going to get probably about 15 to 20 men in Santa Teresa, right on the beach. The days will begin with surfing. And we're going to be doing everything from teaching men how to drive an earth dredger to like working in a sculpting workshop to even doing a ceremony. And the participants, for the most part, I would say are pretty much leaders in their fields. So whether it's AI, in business, in the arts. So it's a very well cultivated group of people that are coming together for one hell of an adventure over a week. It's very novel. On top of that, given that I'm going to be co-leading most of it, we're going to be talking a lot about what's going to make a difference in terms of your diet, putting together your life extension protocols, and how it is that you can actually have a more meaningful life out of what we now understand makes for a meaningful life. So I'm absolutely thrilled. You can't pick a better place than St. Teresa. You've been there, right?
I have not been to Costa Rica. Oddly.
Oh my God.
I know everyone is frolicking through Costa Rica right now and buying land and starting communities there.
Sure.
I'll definitely make my way.
Oh, you guys will, no question about it. If I can get Dave to do this course, it would be remarkable. So it's an adventure that I did once before, and I've been dying to do this one again, right? And I don't want to promote it too much, but let's just say that it's a very soulful experience for men. I mean, at the end, you're just crying from the wonder of what you just went through.
Well, I'll include information in the description of this podcast. If anybody is interested in joining, they can reach out to you and have a discussion. Awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation, Oz. Is there, as we wrap it up, is there anything that maybe is coming through you that you're like, I just want to make sure I say this before we wrap? Yeah,
I got to tell you, I'm amazed at how much territory you and I covered. Think about it. I can't wait to listen to this. I don't have anything left. I think I dropped it all on the table here.
That's so good. Yeah, we did. This is a long podcast. I think it's an hour and 45 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And also the time spent with you, and getting to know you, and how good a conversationalist you are. It's a gift. It's a superpower.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Me too.
Thank you all for joining another episode of Deepen with Christina. Again, if you do enjoy this podcast, please do like, subscribe, rate, give it 5 stars. It helps more people find it, helps me continue to host it, and also brings more people into the web. So I can introduce you to them and you can introduce yourself to each other. Okay, until next time. Bye now.